Hi, this is Michael Buckoff from BetterTOEFLScores.com, and let's take a look at compound sentences in this particular lesson. Now remember that the purpose of understanding grammar, at least in terms of TOEFL, is to make sure that you're using a combination of basic and complex grammar structures in your TOEFL speaking and your TOEFL writing tasks. And as you do this, you're making a minimum, or you're making as few errors as possible, and this helps you get a good score. So obviously you don't want to use a simple sentence all the time in your speaking or in your writing, because that doesn't demonstrate a good knowledge of the English language. So sometimes we want to combine two sentences together, and this is what we call a compound sentence. A compound sentence consists of two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction, for example, and, or, yet, so, for, and but. Remember that these conjunctions are referred to as coordinators, which means they join equal ideas. Okay, here's an example. I had grown quite close to these strangers over the last few days, but I had become incredibly fond of my drama companion. Now in the first independent clause, you have I is your subject, had grown is the verb, and then you'll notice you have your conjunction here, and the second subject is I, and the second verb is had become. Now you notice when we're using the compound sentence, we actually put a comma before the coordinating conjunction, especially if you have a second independent clause, which means it has a subject and a verb there. Now I know what you're thinking. You're arguing, you're saying, Michael, but you already said I had grown and then I had become. Do you really need that second independent clause? And the answer is probably not, which means you could go ahead and get rid of the comma here, and I don't see any problem in doing this. So you could say, let's take a look at it. So you have, I had grown quite close to these strangers over the last few days, but had become incredibly fond of my drama companion. So it's probably better for academic writing to avoid repetition, and you don't really need to repeat the subject twice because it's already understood who you're talking about. But just for the sake of this lesson, I'm demonstrating the compound sentence, so you can kind of have an idea of the basic structure. Now for you, what you want to understand here is in terms of the effect that it has on the reader. This is a main idea. Why? Because it's an independent clause, and independent clauses by their very nature are main ideas. And this is also a main idea because it's a second independent clause. So if you have two main ideas that aren't important enough to stand alone, maybe you might want to combine them together. And to conclude this short lesson on compound sentences, I just want to reiterate an important point here. Remember that it's not just important to understand what the grammar is, but it's important to understand how to use it. The purpose of a compound sentence is to join equally important ideas that are not important enough to stand as their own separate sentences. Alright? So in conclusion, I'd like to invite you to Better TOEFL Scores. If you want me to diagnose your TOEFL speaking and your TOEFL writing, you simply purchase one of my lessons. They're very inexpensive, and I'll be more than happy to listen to your speaking, and I will give you feedback in terms of your grammar, your language, your word choice, your organization, also your pronunciation. So just go to Better TOEFL Scores if you'd like to get some feedback from a TOEFL specialist. You can also do the same with the writing. And remember that as you finish this lesson, remember that it is important for you in your TOEFL speaking and writing to use a combination of basic and complex grammar structures. So for you, it just means that when you're speaking or writing, you don't want to only use the simple sentence all the time. We also have, as we learned in this lesson, the compound sentence, and we also have what's called a complex sentence. You should be using all of these types of sentences in your TOEFL speaking and your TOEFL writing. That is, of course, if you want a good score, and I'm guessing that you do, am I right?